So the book begins literally with a man washing blood off of his hands. Where did this image come from, and what was the inspiration for the book?
Okay. Thank you so much for the question and for the conversation. So the inspiration for the book came from multiple different places in my own writing journey. So the character of Emil Coetzee, who's the protagonist here in the story, The History of Man, is a character that I thought about a long time ago, like maybe 13, 14 years ago, as this colonial civil servant who's a white man with power, who comes to abuse that power in many different ways. And, you know, that was sort of like the character then. And then when I was writing my debut novel, The Theory of Flight, I had this character in there, Emil Coetzee, who had a very minor role, but a very pivotal role in the whole scheme of things. And so when it came to writing the follow-up to that novel, it just made sense to me to follow his story. So The Theory of Flight is, you know, it's an analysis, it's a critique of the post-colonial moment. And I just felt, since I'm very interested in history, that it would be also good to have a novel that's a critique and an analysis of the colonial moment. And I thought that the perfect character for that would be Emil Coetzee, because he is sort of like at the center of everything in that moment, right? He is a white man with power. And so he is able to have this, his reach in the novel is able to be wide, right? So he affects many different lives. And so I thought it would just be very interesting to have this character who has that kind of power, but, you know, is not necessarily very comfortable in that. And so I think I like the image of him washing his hands in the beginning, because in that moment, the country is you know, has called an end to all hostilities. There's no war anymore, right? And so he is doing this act that shows that he is very much out of step with where the country is. He's still washing blood off his hands when everyone else around him is having to accept peace. So obviously he's not necessarily in lockstep with the rest of the country. And I think that is something that is then explored throughout the novel, where we see him always, the state is doing one thing, he's doing something that kind of goes with what the state is doing, but he kind of wants to be doing something different. So he's not necessarily comfortable in his role, or comfortable in his skin, or comfortable with the power that he has. And I really liked that kind of character who's both at home in a situation, but also very much uncomfortable in it, you know. So he's a complicated character. He's a multidimensional character. He's a colonial figure who I think is on this outside of it, on the surface of things, is very much the stereotype of that figure. When you dig deeper, he's much more than that. And so I thought that was very interesting to explore.
Emil is very interesting, as you say, because for me, he's not necessarily a very good person. He does very bad things. And yet you write him with a lot of sympathy. So why did you do that?
You know, it is you know, I think this is what fiction does very well, right? It allows us to have an understanding of a character inside and out, right? And so we get to understand a character in a way that we don't necessarily always understand the people around us in the real world, because we get to see their interiority. And so I think, you know, one of the greatest things that fiction gives us is this ability to empathize with others, people that are different from us, or even people that are the same. But this whole understanding that, you know, for the duration of the story, I get to see the world through this person's eyes, or through this character's eyes. And so for me, it was important that we do that, right? Because as you said, he's not a very he's not a character that's very easy to sympathize with because of all the things that he does, but he's a character that we can definitely empathize with, right? And so it's important for us to understand what he does, how he does it, and why he does it. And I think it's that why and that how that allows us to get to the empathy, right? And so once we understand how he comes to be this kind of colonial figure, how he comes to have the kind of power that he has, what he thought he was going to do with that power, then we get to understand, him as a fuller character. I think, it's just essential that we do that, especially, in the world that we live in today, where, it's very divisive, there's them and us and all that. We need to get to this understanding of other people. I actually, for me as a writer, this is something that I have to do with for all my characters, just not the ones that are most different from me, but even the characters that seem very familiar, you still have to do the same kind of work. And I think Emil for me was a great challenge because he is a white male with power in a colonial period where I, as a Black woman, would not have had any power, would have been at the, something that was totally, supposed to be, silenced and, somewhere far away. And so to actually be able to try and understand this character, it took some work. And when I first imagined the character, he was not as empathetic as he became, I think, because I think he's very he could easily be a stereotype, right? He could easily just be the thing that we see on the surface. And so I really like the fact that the writing process allowed me to understand this character in a fuller way, in a deeper way. And I think, just starting with someone as a boy, because that's what the story does, and then tracing their life journey allows you to really see, because, we all end up somewhere, but we all don't begin there. And I think it's that journey that we need to understand other human beings better. And, as different as he is from me, I think there were some points of similarity between our stories, right? We're both born in the same country under two different time periods, definitely with two different names, but same country, same city. I think, we all both have these childhoods in the savannah that we remember fondly. So there were these moments where I could sort of like tap in to the things that make him as a child and that I could then use to sort of like try and understand him as the story went forward. He's a very complicated character, and but he's a character that, I love, as complicated and as difficult as he is, because I think as a writer, it is your job to not only understand your characters, but love them, even when you don't agree with them. And I think that is something that I was able to do with Emil, yeah.